Hi, everyone, and welcome to Cafe IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Joe Avercamp. He is Vice President, Systems and Solutions at Parsons and has nearly 25 years of experience in technology assessment and development, market analysis, business development and strategy, and project management and delivery. He has extensive experience designing and launching business lines, including intelligent transportation systems, tolling systems, automotive electronics, and wireless data systems. Before joining Parsons, Joe was Chief Technology Lead of Tolling and ITS for Xerox, where he spearheaded the development and launch of the Xerox Vehicle Passenger Detection System, a leading system for high occupancy vehicle enforcement and occupancy counting. Joe, welcome to Cafe IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Pat. It's great to be here, and as we come up to hopefully the end of the pandemic, maybe we can get together in person soon.
I hope so. Well, this is Cafe IBTTA, where we drink coffee and talk about things that are interesting, relevant, uplifting, and fun. And special thanks today to Brian Hutchings from the Central Florida Expressway Authority, who sent me this wonderful mug out of which I'm drinking my delicious coffee today. And shout out to Laura Kelly, the executive director, who is on the IBTTA board. And Joe, you're showing what? You're showing us what there?
This is an old OnStar mug. The OnStar logo doesn't look like this anymore, but when I was launching it, this was the logo. OnStar, Innovative Services in Motion.
So yeah, it would be kind of hard to see the entire logo if it was in your car like that. You know, now it's in a circle, right?
Somebody in marketing came up with a better idea.
All right. Well, this is awards season, and we have 3 awards programs, and we want you to apply for all of them. First, the Toll Excellence Awards are a great way for your organization to be recognized by the international tolling industry. There are 6 categories of awards for both the public and private sector. The submission deadline is May 24th. The new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award, established by the Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion, recognizes IBTTA member organizations that make a significant contribution to advance racial justice, equity, inclusion, and meaningful opportunities in society. The submission deadline is June 14th. And last, the Leadership Academy Alumni Association Alum of the Year Award is also new this year. This award recognizes a leader who has demonstrated and made significant commitments to tolling and the transportation industry after graduating from the IBTTA Leadership Academy. The submission deadline is June 18th. Now, I know Mark Compton, our president, would say that Penn Turnpike is going to win all the major awards. And wouldn't it be better if there were 100 people who applied instead of 10 people? So at any rate, apply for those awards and show off your stuff and see if you can win. Well, we are taking your questions and comments, and we want to get started right away. Some of you know that Joe Avercamp grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. So using the chat function and selecting the option all panelists and attendees, please type a word or phrase describing your thoughts and feelings about Wisconsin. All right? We're talking about Wisconsin. Tell us about your thoughts and feelings about Wisconsin. All right. Yes.
Cheeseheads.
Yes. Cheeseheads. Fresh air. Okay. Oh, Kringle. I know Kringle.
Packers. Yeah. We got some Packers fans out there.
Packers fans. All right. Cold. Bratwurst.
It is cold.
Never been, but you should go. Okay. EAA. What's that, Joe?
It's an Oshkosh. It's the Experimental Aircraft Association. Every August, they have a fly-in with all the experimental aircraft into Oshkosh, Wisconsin.
Okay.
True Wisconsinite there. Who asked that question?
That was Benton Tempest. Yeah.
Benton. Great.
All right. We got the Brewers. We get beer, polka, Marquette, and interesting accents. Joe, you want to demonstrate one of those interesting accents?
She's talking about Minnesota.
Okay. All right. It's the Minnesotans that have the accent. Yeah, Wisconsin is no regional dialect.
Huh? No regional dialect in Wisconsin.
Okay. Well, Joe, we've heard all these wonderful and interesting things about Wisconsin. Why don't you tell us about your upbringing, growing up in that great state of Wisconsin?
So a couple things that you should know. I mean, it's cold in Wisconsin. I think everybody knows that. And I grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. I was one of 11 children. I have 6 brothers and 4 sisters. Pat and Wanda encouraged me to show the picture. I haven't got model releases from my family, but this is our very young family a long time ago. So,
and if you hold that there for just a couple more seconds, Joe, we'll ask people to see if they can identify you in the photo.
Who is Joe?
Using coordinates like next to this one or next to that one. Yeah, I know it's probably kind of hard. You want to point yourself
Pat Jones
out?
got it right away.
Yeah, I did. Joe's right behind his mom.
Right behind my mom. This is
Joe has her back. Yeah.
This is me. I am the middle child. It leads to adaptability, the ability to follow or lead as needed. So essentially, like I said, I grew up on a dairy farm. We had about 25 dairy cattle and maybe a dozen calves at any time. Also raised chickens. Dairy farming is hard. Among the things I learned is because cows have to be milked every morning at 5:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. twice a day. If they don't get milked, they get diseases, they get sick. If you're going to be a dairy farmer, you got to work a lot. And oh, by the way, cows don't take a day off, so neither do you. So it's a 365-day-a-year job, 366 during leap years. And there's a lot of work that has to be done on a farm, baling hay, planting corn, harvesting corn, oats, all of those types of things. The house I grew up in was built in like the 1870s when my great-grandfather came to America. And it had a few modest improvements. I mean, it had electricity added, but it didn't have a furnace. It had a stove. The way we kept ourselves warm on Wisconsin nights is we would heat up bricks on the stove, wrap it in a towel, and that would sit at the foot of your bed and keep your feet warm. And if your feet were warm, the rest of you tried to stay warm. So it was that kind of upbringing. So very, very fun and interesting, but not a lot of luxuries, I would say.
Joe, does that wrapped brick actually go in the bed with you?
Yes, under the blankets. So you get the brick hot. I mean, not like scalding hot, but 100 degrees or so, and then you put it in the towel, and then you put it at the foot of your bed.
It's sort of the solid rectangular version of the hot water bottle, huh?
Correct. That's exactly what it is.
Okay. Now, I think you've got an aerial view of your farm there. Can you show us that?
I do have that. Here we go. This is the barn is here.
Yeah.
And the house is over here. Like I said, is built in the 1870s out of shiplath. We had one water line coming into the house, so there was no plumbing, commodes, any of the modern conveniences. I'm happy every day when I get up, Pat, and I find, the bathroom's just down the hall. So
one of the great pleasures of life.
It is. Alexandria, Virginia is a long way from Keeler, Wisconsin. So
yeah. So Joe, give us some of the wisdom of the farm. What are some of the lessons you learned from growing up on a farm?
There's probably, one thing is hard work. Because you are working all the time, in addition to going to school and, keeping up with your studies, you have to milk the cows, you have to bale hay. So hard work is a must. Early rising. The habit of getting up at 5:30 a.m. sticks with me to this day. So if you get an email from me at 5:30 in the morning, 5:45 in the morning, it's because I'm up anyway. It's just, it's a hard habit to break.
Yeah.
And I haven't really tried to break it. The other things you have to learn is versatility, because a farmer has all the jobs on the farm. When the tractor breaks, you're a mechanic. When the cows are sick, you're a veterinarian. When you're trying to figure out how to balance the books, you're an accountant. So you have to be very versatile. It requires a lot of different jobs. Humility is another thing, because nobody is too good to pitch manure. Everybody has to go pitch manure and clean out the calf pens or the chicken house, occasionally. And so you have to be humble. There's a lot of servant leadership that goes on, because while you can provide leadership, you don't get to skate away from the hard jobs. And then education, because one of the things I learned was I wanted to do something not farming. So I had to go get an education. So
cool. So tell us a little bit then about the post-farming life. You went to high school and you went away to school. You started to get your education. What was that like?
So I first went to, so right after graduation, my father passed away, and I didn't really see a way because we didn't have a lot of money to pay for college. So I joined the Army, qualified for the GI Bill. Actually, it took me to interesting places, gave me an interesting job. I was a military police patrol dog handler. In fact, here's a picture that Pat and Wanda found fun and exciting. It's a younger, slimmer version of Joe with his dog Jody. This is in a field in Alaska somewhere. I don't know how many years ago.
You look like a bad guy there, Joe.
Well,
you could do some damage, huh?
If you're an MP, you often have to take people out of bad places. So Jody and I did that together. Go ahead, Pat.
What? Jody is your dog's name?
Jody.
Jody. Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't name him. So I did, when I was stationed in California, I had a dog named Fritz. The dogs, you move between dogs as you move duty stations. And of course, I did ask for a transfer. I thought, I'd like to go. I got nothing to lose. Give me an assignment in Korea or Germany. And the Army, in its infinite wisdom, decided Alaska was far enough overseas for Joe. So that's what I spent the last year and a half, 2 winters in Alaska. Not much daylight, interesting place to visit. I don't know that I would be a person capable of living there all the time, but it is a beautiful state if you ever get a chance to get there.
We got a couple of questions here, and we are taking your questions, and please use the all panelists and attendees selection there. One question, what year was the photo taken? And this is from Wanda, and Vicky Dewey asks if the farm is still in your family.
The farm is not in our family anymore. The photo was taken, I'm going to guess, 1979.
Oh, okay.
So there, Wanda, you figured something out about me. As far as the farm, since no one wanted to stay and run the farm, we've all gone off to other occupations and lives. The farm is not in the family anymore. So, and then, the next part of, is where I really, after I got out of the service and I went to college, I went to a small school in the Midwest. I got a degree in electrical engineering. And if you're a kid from the Midwest, the auto industry is a natural place to go. And Detroit was in need of electrical engineers because that was a time in the 80s when cars were getting electronic fuel injection, electronic instrument clusters, electronic engine controls. So I went to work for Ford Motor Company. That was really, my first important stop on the way. And I ended up working as a wireless engineer and business planner. I specialized in wireless communications. And I know, Pat, you and I were chatting about this earlier. Among the things as a young engineer that were formative for me was Ford had acquired Jaguar. And so I spent time going to Coventry, England, and working with the Jaguar engineers. And it was a very interesting experience from the perspective of, at Ford Motor, we were all about, quality was job one. Everybody remembers that saying. It was more than a slogan. It was actually a way of life. And we were trying to instill manufacturing discipline, repeatability, quality, build cars at scales. Jaguar engineers were much more about building a piece of art. When we would do ergonomic studies, and we would decide where should you place the radio button. We would want it placed so the customer, the user, only has to reach so far, but they would always want the wood grain to not be disturbed. And we would. It was they are beautiful, beautiful cars, absolutely. And I remember talking with them at the time about Lexus. Lexus was just an emerging car company, and they would say, you can mistake a Camry for a Lexus, but a Jaguar will always be a Jaguar. So that was one of the more interesting things that I did. But toward the mid-90s, we ended up launching a product at Ford called Remote Emergency Satellite Cellular Unit, RESCU. And it was one of the first systems that used GPS and wireless communications to summon assistance when you were in a crash or you needed roadside assistance. This was right after the first Gulf War, when we all learned about how accurate GPS could be for missile systems, and then turning it to commercial use with a system called Rescue. But our buddies over across town at GM were cooking up a new thing called OnStar. And Motorola, having seen what I did at Ford, recruited me to help build the OnStar system. And and it's an incredible system with respect to, I mean, there are tens of millions of subscribers. They've saved, because of the early arrival of people, first responders to the scene. I mean, they've saved thousands of lives. So, you know, it's a great example of technology use. So, and then, so that's kind of the end of my automotive phase. I then moved into wireless because of Sprint. I went to work for Sprint PCS, who wanted to put OnStar on a phone. If you recall, at the time, wireless phones were just really coming into vogue. And the problem that 911 operators were having is that they couldn't identify where you are with your cell phone.
Yeah.
At the time, most calls came from landline phones, and that a landline phone is associated with an address, a home or an office. But cell phones could be anywhere. So we had to build a system at Sprint PCS that allowed caller ID to be provided to the PSAP, Public Safety Answering Point operator, as well as location information and also the geospatial information systems posted on a map. We did all that, and the FCC mandated it, but they didn't give us a way to pay for it. So we had to create business models, which we did. And now, now you have maps on the phone. It leads to the whole plethora of apps, geocaching, Pokemon. The Pokemon game is based on location. And so that's what I did. I launched several incubators there with mobile financial services, location-based services, wireless data telemetry. So that was what I did. And then about 2008, I figured I'd try my hand at this GovTech stuff. So government technology. And since then, I've been working in, with Xerox. Now I'm, of course, at Parsons, working with tolling and ITS solutions, trying to leverage the technologies that, I know so much about and worked with throughout my career.
Here's a question from Rush Wicks. With the move towards connected vehicles, how close are we towards eventually seeing an integrated toll payment module included in all new vehicles by default?
We are a ways away from that still. So there is the integrated toll module on Audis that you can get, and that's essentially a multi-protocol toll tag that TransCore integrates. I mean, that's an interesting solution. The way that I think it will eventually work is most automakers are already putting wireless communication modems in their cars. So if you watched my panel from 2 weeks ago at the IVTTA Tech Summit, Laura Jakowski of Ford was there, and she basically explained how Ford has put a wireless data modem in every car they've built since about 2019. So eventually, we're going to have a communications device with GPS in virtually every car that is sold. We're in this transition phase where there's 270 million cars in the installed base today. It takes a while for the fleet to turn over, but in time, so we're probably still 10 years away from every vehicle, or a significant majority of the vehicles, having built-in communications capability that we could leverage as an industry. So,
as you were describing Ford and the relationship with Jaguar and the rescue package, I was thinking about the movie Ford versus Ferrari. Have you seen that film?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great movie.
So any observations about Ford and the automotive industry, on the basis of that fun film?
The thing that always strikes me, and so I love cars. I've owned several. I've owned Taurus shows and Acuras, and I've never owned a Ferrari. But so maybe I need to talk to my boss about that. But to me, it's still fascinating to me that a bunch of parts come in at one end of the plant, get assembled, and at the other end of the line, you have a car that starts. I mean, when we did prototype days where we'd have a new model introduction, you'd have to build a car and put everything together and make it work. And just the fact that you could turn the key and it would start. I mean, I still think that's incredible because they are such complex systems. I mean, and it is amazing to see one come together. So.
Well, we are taking your questions. Our guest today is Joe Averkamp. He's the Vice President for Systems and Solutions with Parsons. Please use the chat function and select all panelists and attendees. And here's a question from Benton, who knew about AAE, right, in Wisconsin.
EAA, yeah.
EAA. What's your dream car, Joe?
What is my dream car? So I used to say like a McLaren F1, but they're hard to get in and out of.
I missed that.
A McLaren?
A McLaren, okay.
McLaren, yeah. Except I find as I get older, it's harder and harder to get out of sports cars. Those little end things. I mean, my dream car, and I'm sure it's a lot better. I mean, it's not as good as I remember, but my first car was a 1970 Ford Torino with a 351 Windsor engine, V8. It could really fly. And I'm sure if I got in it, and at the time it was like, wow, this thing is awesome. I'm sure at the time, if I got in it today, it'd be like, wow, because we've improved suspension, acceleration, handling, harshness on the steering wheel. All of that is so much better on cars today that I'm sure it's just a fond memory. My 1970 black Ford Torino, the Starsky and Hutch car. So anyway.
Yeah. Joe, you mentioned a little while ago the technology summit, which we had, I guess, about 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And you were the co-chief meeting organizer with Merrill Mandis with the State Road and Tollway Authority. Tell us a little bit about some of your takeaways from the technology summit. Great
question. I want to thank Merrill again. She was a great partner to work with as far as pulling together the summit. I think the sessions that I've heard went very well were, I think the regional roundtables. We set it up where each of the regions talked: the Northeast, the Southeast, the Midwest, the Southwest, the West, and then an international session. And I think that was very popular because we got to hear directly from toll agencies, what problems are they facing? Do they have, what kind of solutions are they looking for? That was very good. I think I've heard very good feedback on the Tyler Duvall interview. I interviewed Tyler Duvall, CEO of Cavenue. He's been the Assistant Secretary for Policy at USDOT, so he has a very good understanding of funding challenges. I think that went very well. And I also, the panel where we brought in Ford, Google, AT&T, Chris Heiser from Renovo, the good-looking California beach guy, as we say, and of course, Roger Langto. I think that was very well received because those are people that come from outside our industry, have very different viewpoints than we do about how things should work.
Yeah. Here's another question about Ford from Bill Kramer. What do you think about Ford launching its popular F-150 pickup truck with an electric version?
I think it's a sign of things to come. I mean, it's going to have, we're solving the problems of range anxiety. I mean, and obviously Tesla's in the lead on that because all the apps now can show you where the nearest charging station is. I mean, so we've got range on these vehicles up to, 400, 500 miles. And if you can find a charging station, and of course, the other thing is that electric motors provide just tremendous torque. So they're great for towing and stuff. So I think it's a sign of things to come. And it's also going to create a challenge for transportation funding. So
Vicki Dewey says that visionaries from outside our industry, that session was a very interesting session.
Yes. Yeah, the tech panel with, Ford, there were several things I could talk about, but Laura Jakowski talking about the fact that her entire job is building the Ford Connected platform, which I think we're going to have to leverage because they have wireless data modems in the car. They control access to it. If we want to utilize that, I don't know what it's going to cost. Those are the sorts of discussions we need to have with the auto industry and people like Ford. But I mean, I agree with Vicki. I think it was a great session. It's what I put that panel together the last couple of years. We did it in Orlando as well, and it's one of my favorite panels, and that's why I love moderating that panel. So,
Joe, one of the questions that keeps coming to mind is this whole tension between technology and policy. Is policy driving technology, technology policy? Talk to us a little bit about that tension.
So the thing I would reflect on is that in the private sector, one of the things that technology is almost always, it's driven by the profit motive. So if you're able to show a way to get more throughput, save a few dollars of cost. They quickly adopt. You can go to a company and they'll adopt your innovation. In our sector, it's harder because we have competing motivations, right? Because we want to make sure we increase miles per gallon, which is got to increase miles per gallon, which also, but that then leads to a reduction in gas tax collection. We also have to concern ourselves with the aspects of social equity, because if you look at some of the VMT or congestion pricing initiatives, that's a concern as well. So that's the tension that we have here, is that we're trying to achieve multiple policy objectives. I mean, technologists, engineers will build what you ask them to build within the laws of physics, right? And they've been pretty successful. I mean, when you look at the trajectory that electrical engineering has taken over the past 30 years, just the rise of cell phones, the rise of the internet, the rise of personal computing, all of that is engineers, applying their trade. But the challenge is we have to, and we're a slow, deliberative process here in the U.S. We have to figure out which policies we want to implement. So,
I was listening to a story on NPR last night that was talking about the goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And the person who was being interviewed said, if for us to achieve that in the next 8.5 years, by 2030, we have to have 60% of the vehicles that are produced in America be electric vehicles.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, and I don't think we're on a pace to do that yet, but and I'm a numbers guy. So there's about 270 million cars and light trucks on the road. And in the US, there's about 17 million sold annually. So the only way you can change out that fleet is to sell 10 or 11 million electric vehicles. Now, last year, we sold a little over 1 million. I mean, Tesla had a 500,000 vehicle year,
right?
But we have to accelerate that pace, and it's going to create a significant demand for electric vehicles. But also, there's a Politico story from like May 12th where the OMB indicated that their analysis showed that a $100 charge on electric vehicles would only solve 2% of the federal gas tax shortfall. So a $100 charge is only going to replace, because we need to get significantly more electric vehicles on the roadway, which is, and then of course, then we're going to have to solve the problem of how we pay for funding. So,
Joe, you're a student of history. What are you reading now, and what do you recommend?
So I'm currently reading How Ike Led. As you and I, we talk about presidents when we have breakfast together and stuff. And Eisenhower is somebody I admire a lot. He's a kid from Abilene, Kansas, goes to West Point, eventually becomes the supreme Allied commander who leads the invasion of Europe. But then after that, he goes on he's president of Columbia University. He's the NATO commander. First commander of NATO. He negotiates the truce in Korea, ends the war there. Interstate highway system is entirely built on the strength of his vision and leadership, and we all benefit from that today. I mean, it's something that 60 years later echoes throughout the system. But even on other things, like for instance, he doesn't get a lot of credit for this, but in 1957 he sent the 101st Airborne in to Little Rock to force the integration of Little Rock Central High. So I would recommend everybody read a biography. Stephen Ambrose has a great biography of Eisenhower. I'm reading this book called How Ike Led, and he's really a very thoughtful, strategic person. He called himself a progressive conservative because he tried to find the right balance. And he was very much understood Washington, better than anybody, and was able to manage it, I think. So I would recommend Eisenhower.
Joe, what are your favorite Eisenhower quotes?
I know you have a favorite, but we'll get one of mine is, of course, plans are nothing, planning is everything. And he talks about the fact that, it's his way of saying, like, preparing for the invasion of D-Day, there was 1,000 things that could have gone wrong. And he had to be adaptable with his plans. So that's a favorite one. Another one is when he talks about life on the farm sure looks easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles away from the cornfield. So anyway, so I'm very happy.
That's one you can really appreciate.
I can really appreciate that one, Pat. But you have one about leadership that you like.
Yes, I do. One of my favorite Eisenhower quotes goes something like, leadership is the ability to get a group of people to do what you want because they want to do it. That's one of my favorite Eisenhower quotes.
I mean, I just took, my son, Liam, I have a 10-year-old son, and we went to Gettysburg, and outside Gettysburg is the Eisenhower National Farm. It's part of the National Park Service. I always like to go visit that. And I don't know, I feel inspired by what the general did. So
an amazing man.
Yeah.
Joe, I'm going to make a couple of announcements and then come back to you for your final words of wisdom.
Okay.
So don't forget to complete the survey that you'll receive at the end of today's program. Next week, our guest on Cafe IBTTA is Shannon Swank, co-founder and chief marketing officer of PlusPass. On May 25 at 11 a.m., we have a webinar on addressing all customers respectfully. This is brought to you by the Communications Committee. June 10 is our book club. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. This is put on by the Task Force on Diversity, Social, and Racial Inclusion. And on June 16, we are partnering with WTS on a webinar titled Discussion and Briefing on Human Trafficking. And we will have experts from Truckers Against Tolling, the FBI, and Yasmin Gramian, the Secretary of Pennsylvania DOT. Check out the website for all the other events, including the annual meeting in October, our maintenance roadway operations workshop in November, and visit the website for all the details on all future IBTTA meetings. And don't forget to complete the survey at the end of this program to tell us what you think about Cafe IBTTA. Well, Joe, what final words of wisdom do you have for us before we sign off?
So a couple thoughts. One is that this industry is uniquely positioned to solve the funding problem. I think we have the infrastructure and the people in place that can do it. It's something we're going to have to solve because as we improve miles per gallon, we're going to run out of cars that we can tax unless we put in a system. And I spent my career about systems and technologies, but ultimately, I mean, we always have to remember that people are at the center of this. There are customers. I mean, there are users. That's one of the things that struck me about the tech panel is when you listen to Laura Jakowski-Ford or Manali Shaw, it has to start with the user first, make the experience meaningful and useful for them, give them utility. And so, it's a human business. It's about your customers, your employees, and the people in your lives. So I would always say, always keep that in mind. Don't forget that. So.
Good wisdom. Joe, it's been a pleasure having you on Cafe IBTTA. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Pat. It's been great.
And thanks to you, IBTTA members. Be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.